With the first 2 rounds in place on your building, you should be ready to start the rest of the log work and complete the walls. By this time, you should be confident of your ability to handle the saw, to cut notches, cut grooves, and also to handle the logs. The ability to choose the right log is going to be your next challenge. The mark of a good builder is one who can choose the log from the logs that are available and put it in the building and do a good job of it. So what we're going to do here is present you with a few tips how to accomplish this. The logs you may have to work with can deviate greatly from what you may feel is ideal. It is realistically possible to use logs that are tapered, machine damaged, and dissimilar in size, shape, and form. If the logs are straight, uniform, and with a minimal taper, the job of choosing the next log becomes much simpler. Let's deal with the last, simpler group first. Then you should be able to apply the same principles to the more difficult choices. You will already have made your choice of log species. They are all good if properly protected. The preferred species would be cypress, cedar, and Douglas fir, then pine, spruce, balsam fir, and all the hardwoods. Obtain logs that are as uniform as possible as to size, range, and taper. You will, of course, try to get logs that are straight and without spiral grain, and logs that have a conical or full form. Try to avoid skinny or nebuloid forms, but most important, logs that are the same general form and size. In all likelihood, you will have to buy your logs. Visit the supplier's operation if possible. Specify logs by length, top size, quality, and form. Shorter logs will have to have larger tops to have the same midpoint diameter. Quality will specify no rot, spiral grain within limits of 1 inch in 10 feet, and particularly no machine damage. These ideals are rarely met. Form will include the rate of taper, for example 1 inch in 10 feet, and the amount of curve or sweep. For this I suggest that a string on the center line will not go outside the log in a 30-foot length. While it is a good idea to choose the logs 2 at a time for a building that has only 4 walls, you should also keep the specifications for the next 2 logs in mind as well. If your building has 5 or more walls, select the logs that will complete the half round. If the logs you choose have much the same midpoint diameter, there should be no problem. If for some reason one log is smaller than the other, remember that you will have to pick a larger than average size next time to make up the height. It is a common error in log selection to think that shorter logs should be smaller. This is obviously not so. The midpoint diameter will have to average out the same on each wall by the time the wall is complete. You have considerable liberty in respect to log size as the wall goes up. Parallel walls should be equal in height, and each corner should be close to the same height at the even numbered rounds, 2, 4, 6. Plan 2 rounds ahead at each wall, because the sequence repeats every 2 rounds. So if the logs will work for 2 rounds, you can keep on going. What you are trying to avoid is the need to cut a notch so deep that it goes right on through the log. The normal way to start a building is to place the first 2 half logs with the butt ends pointing the same way. The 2 3/4 logs will also have their butt ends pointing the same way, although it generally will not matter whether this is to the right or to the left. You now have examples of each of the 4 possible corner combinations. 1. Butt on butt. 2. Butt on top. 3. Top on top. And 4. Top on butt. It is, of course, possible to modify this arrangement and switch the ends of the first 2 logs. This will not, however, change or simplify anything, and may cause some problems when you come to the top of the wall, and if you want, for instance, to have the 2 butt ends extended in the same direction. The same sequence of log end combinations will also happen up the wall at each corner as you build. At corner number 1, the next log will be a top on a butt, then a top on a top, then a butt on a top, then back to butt on butt. Log choice, then, is dependent on required wall height, log length, and the height of material above the notch. When you have completed the 3rd round, measure the height of the wall from the foundation at each notch. The height of butt and top respectively for one log might be 800 millimeters and 750 millimeters. At the other wall, the heights are 810 millimeters and 760 millimeters. Ideally, you might choose a log for the second wall that has a slightly larger size than the choice for the first wall. This should bring the final heights to very near level and equal. A difference of 25 millimeters is acceptable. The log choice will have to be modified by the lengths of the available logs. If a short log is required, don't cut a long straight log just because the size may be perfect. Look for a short log or a crooked log that is within limits. The height of wood above the notch must be considered also before the next log is chosen. At corner number 1 for round 4, you will be placing a top on a butt. The height of wood above the notch should be somewhat more than half the diameter of the top you will choose. This will require a notch that is more than half the diameter of the top. The next top on the adjacent wall then will be notched less than halfway to provide material for the fifth log that will be a butt end. If your construction is more complex than a simple four-wall structure, you will have to give more thought to keeping the wall height under control. At each even round, it is important that the wall height from the foundation be within a tolerance of 1 to 1 1/2 inches or 40 millimeters from end to end. At this point in your building, you will be not using your best logs, and a little variation in wall height will be acceptable. It is a waste of time to insist that these logs be dead level. This is accomplished in several ways. 1. Pick logs of a size that will improve the wall height. 2. Correct any difference when you come to the window height. You will now be using short logs, and you can use greatly different diameters to reach a level before the top of the window or the header log. Mark the height of the wall on each end of each log as it is finished. You will then have an easy reminder when you go to get the next piece. By short log, we mean logs that don't go the full length of the wall. These logs will most often have only one notch in them as they go from a corner to a window or doorway. They may also have no notches, as in the pieces between the windows. By learning to handle this kind of log, you can save a lot of expense in cutting long logs. You can use short pieces that would otherwise be waste. You can regain control of the wall height if that should be necessary, and you can better center the logs at a window opening or a doorway. Cut the piece to length, then cut a small location notch before placing the log on the wall. You can measure the receiver portion and cut accordingly, or you can just guess when you are sufficiently experienced. This will save the trouble of rolling the log on the wall and also make it more stable while you move it into the best position for scribing. Use a block the height of your chosen scribe to locate the width of the location notch. Measure the width of the location notch to the center line and measure the depth. or use a log caliper to find the required depth and width. Note these measurements on the face of the scarf. The larger number should always be the width of the notch. On the sill log, note the length of the logs needed for that particular location and mark in the specified overhang. Provide each wall with a letter designation so you can pick a log for that wall. A small piece of white polyethylene makes a good reusable notepad. Roll the log to find the correct location for the notch. Remember that the notch will have to be on the bottom of the log and the bow out when your work has been placed on the wall. Check your notes, then lay out the top and bottom widths for the notch. The first cuts are made straight down at the center to the depth you have noted at the notch location. If you know the height of your chainsaw bar, you can judge this cut quite accurately. The depth of this notch is more important than the width and should be cut accurately so that the scribe width is even. The notch should be slightly wide so that it will sit solidly on the top of the scarf. At the other end, use a block that won't interfere with the scribers. You can use a square or bow tie block, an adjustable butterfly block, or you can use a horse made of 2x4. These are the types most commonly used, but other solutions are also possible. Most often a standard width of block is used, such as a length of 2x4, and the location notch cut to provide the same width at the notch end. Whichever you use, be sure to dog or cleat the piece firmly into place before you scribe it. If there are several short pieces on one wall, you should pay attention to keeping them in alignment. The height can be controlled by scribe setting and piece selection, but you should be sure that the center line is carried accurately to the top. This should take care of the vertical plane. Pay some heed also to the horizontal plane, because this will have to be lined up and uniform when you reach the top of the windows and you want to place the header log. For those walls in which there are no openings, the logs can be treated in the normal way as described in tape number 4, saddle notch. Before we start to work on the doors and windows, there are a few other things we should take care of as we start the log walls. If you are building on your foundation, you will have to place anchor bolts and provide holes for through bolts and electrical wires as you build. Here we are using a rebuilding project to provide a demonstration platform. It is possible to place the anchor bolts or hardware into the concrete, then lay out and drill the sill logs to fit. Be careful to ensure that the bolts are on the center line and that they are in the correct location. Also be sure that the J-bolts are long enough to reach through the sill log and any sill material. These bolts are short and need link nuts to extend them. If the anchor bolts are not well placed, it is possible to offset a line and reference the bolt locations to this line. These measurements can then be duplicated on your sill log or timber piece. Place a moisture barrier on top of the concrete, then place the sill piece. The floor is now put in place in this demonstration. A sill seal is placed on top of the treated timber pad and a baseline again employed on the sill log to locate the anchor bolts. Countersink the bolt locations on the top of the sill log so that the top of the bolt will be about ½ inch below the top of the log. Then place the sill logs in position. The anchor bolts should be well tightened, and then the excess material can be broken off. Electrical access holes will also have to be started and carefully continued as each round is finished. Of course, if you are building off the foundation, all these holes can be placed as the wall is dismantled for loading. In many cases, the house is constructed on a temporary foundation right alongside the permanent foundation for the sake of this convenience. Originate the hole on the center line with at least a 1 inch or 30 millimeter drill bit and angle the bit to finish on the inside of the concrete. Make a pencil mark on the side of the log at 90 degrees to the center of this hole. The center for the hole in the next log can be located from this mark after the log has been scribed, and the hole is drilled when the log is on the ground. This way the underneath hole will not be plugged with chips. For the most part, electrical holes will only have to be placed in the first 2 or 3 logs, but a hole can be drilled the full height of the wall this way. Keyways at doors and windows also provide an opportunity to take wires to the upper levels. When the position of the fixture has been reached, make a cutout for the box to avoid the possibility of damaging the electrical wires later. Then place a fish cord in the hole to make installation quick and easy. Through-bolt holes, if required, will be smaller, so take extra care in lining them up. Most often, these will be specified at the corners only. Drift pins at intervals along the wall may also be required. These will be placed as the wall goes up. They should be staggered along the course, and rather than marking the location with a crayon, I would staple a short length of surveyor's tape to the location as a guide. Larger drift pins should be greased before they are put in place. Drill the top hole to the size of the drift and the bottom log with a smaller hole. Another operation must be ongoing if you are building on the foundation. That is, insulating or packing the logs. Use strips cut from fiberglass insulation bats and staple these into the longitudinal groove and around the notch. Use enough to fill the groove without any danger of holding the log up. Tar-soaked foam strips can also be obtained for this function. These strips can be used on both the inside and outside edge of the groove, and they greatly improve the weather seal capability. Your fully completed log work can now be positioned in its place on the wall. As the wall height approaches the height of the bottom of the windows, that is in the order of 3 feet or 1 meter, you will start to use short logs. We have already dealt with the placement of these logs and the control of the wall height In addition to the alignment of these logs, it is a good idea to measure the length accurately. This should be 50 millimeters or about 2 inches longer than the final cut for the opening. The bottom of the opening need not be cut yet, but plan to locate this height a little above the midpoint of the log. In most cases, you will have the option of adjusting the window height to meet this criteria. If not, try to choose log sizes in advance to accomplish the purpose. Logs that are cut almost through make a poor lower sill position. Door openings are handled in exactly the same way. The only difference will be the amount of settling space left at the top. More about this when we do the layout on the header log. Header log is the name given to the log that will have the cutout for the top of the windows and doors. Ideally, the flat cut for the top of the window or door should be a little below the midpoint of the log and at 2150 millimeters or 7 feet above the finished floor. Some compromise will often have to be accepted, but this is what you should aim for, and if you have good logs, it's quite attainable. When the header log is on the building and ready for scribing, the layout for the tops of the openings can be undertaken. Determine the scribe width that you will use and note this in a location that will be cut away later. Locate the center line of the opening and measure in the width. If you have previously located this center on the sill log, it will only be necessary to bring the mark up with a level. If you do not have this location, measure it onto the center line of the header log and transfer it down to each side with a square on the center line and a level on the side. Or measure from the center line layout you cut onto the top of the stump. Measure up from the bottom of the sill log to locate the top cut of the window. Add the scribe width to the combined window height and settling allowance, and use this to determine the optimum window location. Settling allowance is related to the height of the opening you are working on. For green logs, this allowance should be 1 to 16, or simply divide the door or window height in millimeters or inches by 16 to give you the additional height needed for settling. For example, a window that is 900 millimeters or 36 inches high, the allowance would be 900 divided by 16, which would be 56 millimeters, or 36 divided by 16, which would be 2 1/4 inches. Mark the exact cut width onto the header log. Then extend the height measurement that you have already located to intersect this mark. Use your level to draw this height to the other side of the window, or better yet, snap a linked line at the header height after you have measured in the exact window width. On the other side of the log, you can again measure from the foundation line, or better, you can use a level across the top of the log to locate your height line on the other side. Steady the level with a wedge, then get an accurate distance to the header line. Mark the position of the level so it can be repositioned for the other side. Transfer your measurements to the other side, then snap an ink line between them. The width of the window will be located after the log has been placed on the ground. Finally, bring the center lines up if they are not already on the log, and your initial layout is complete. When the rest of the scribe has been completed, remove the log from the wall and place it for cutting. Before you cut out the groove and the top of the window opening, snap a center line onto the bottom of the log and use this to bring the cut lines across at right angles. The cut line can be located in a very standard and accurate way by using two squares on the center lines. Bring the original end mark up to locate this length on the center line. Use the same system to locate the mark on the inside level line. Draw the line by bending the square or steel straightedge around the log and joining up your three marks. You can measure in the width of the window to the other end from each of these three marks, or it may be a good idea to check the cut line location with the squares in order to avoid any possibility of making a mistake. Draw in the second cut line and score them both, and also score the notches or notch, as the case may be. Start the cut with the tip of the bar at the 2 o'clock position, then walk the saw or allow the saw to gain across the top of the log. Move very slowly and accurately with the cut right on the line. Do the same on the other end. Continue the cut to within 5 millimeters of the line and make sure that it's straight on the bottom. Now make a second cut right alongside this one and clean it out to the line. This will allow you to watch the tip of the saw as you plunge cut through. Then continue this cut to the end and, as usual, be cautious that you don't overcut any of the lines. Brush the flap down to the line, then lay out the end cuts for the keyway and the window trim. It is very important to make these cuts in the window header at this point in the building. If they are postponed until the wall is complete and on the foundation, they will become a very dangerous and time-consuming undertaking. There are, of course, many possible profiles for this cut. The one shown here has proved to be very satisfactory. Draw the center line down the log end and work from that. Measure in the width of the keyway, the width of the window frame, and the width of the trim on each side. Measure in the depth of these cuts. The accuracy of the original cut will affect the ease of this layout, and a smooth, straight cut will help maintain your standard of accuracy. If your window frame is very narrow, you may have to adjust the center line for the window so that the end of the groove in your log is covered. The 45-degree bevel cut is judged by cutting diagonally across the square trim layout. Your judgment should be sufficient here, but if you are unsure, you can make a target mark down the log equidistant from the inside terminal of the cut. Finish the 45-degree cuts, then mark in the back of the trim cut. Because the 45-degree cut may not be entirely plumb, make your line square with the top of the opening. This small cut might just as well be done with a sharp chisel. Cut out the keyway and the other end. It is a good idea to completely finish this work now while the log is in a convenient position on the ground. This work will have to be done at some point and can be done much more quickly now. Try to keep the keyway cut straight and an accurate fit to the key material you plan to use. If the cut is too tight, it will tend to split the log end, and if it is too loose, it will not do the job as well. It may pay to do a little practice before you do this first keyway cut. Use a small power plane or hand plane to finish the top of the opening. I would rather not use a sander here because good alignment of the work will allow the trim to fit better. Finish around the ends of the cut with a chisel or slick, then cut out the notches and groove in the regular way. At that point, the header log is ready to be replaced on the wall. With the header log in place, it is customary to continue the building to the plate log and roof support, then return to the task of finishing the log ends and openings. I have included window, door, and other trim work here because it seems appropriate. Cut the sides of the opening to the final dimension. Use a saw guide or a padded saw to make the cut. Be sure that the guide plank is wedged into line with the center line of the wall so that you're getting a cut at right angles to the wall. Cut to within 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters of the bottom line on each side. Plunge cut through on the bottom line and finish the flat. Then use a level to mark in the cut lines for the keyway. It is customary to make this keyway 1 1/2 inches or 40 millimeters wide to fit a 2x4. Many other dimensioned materials could be used here, but get a good fit that is not too tight. If you have to drive the key piece in, it is too tight. Enter the saw into the start you have made on the header log. As you can see, it will be very easy to have a very dangerous kickback by touching the saw to the top of the header. Be very sure not to do that. Make the cut sufficiently deep for your material and parallel to the wall. There is a tendency to pinch the slot to the back. If you plan to place wires behind the key piece, make the slot deeper. The center of the slot can be cleaned out with several angled cuts, the same as we did with the header log. Position a guide board and use a large router to cut the trim recess. If you don't have such a machine, make the bevel cuts on the log ends, then cut this step with a large chisel. The angle for the bevel can be marked on the bottom flat and the saw aligned with that. The angle of 45 degrees or less appeals to me, but many other design cuts are possible. Doorways can be done in much the same way. The installation of the door and window frames will be dealt with in the first finishing video that will bring our project to lockup. You have only 3 more jobs to complete to finish your log work. 1. Cut out any archways. Be careful to keep the saw at right angles to the wall. Make a practice cut at least 6 inches inside the final cut line if you've not done this before. 2. Cut the log ends to the design and profile that you choose. And 3. Finally sand the log ends and openings with first 36 grit, then an 80 grit paper. At this point, your log house shell should be complete.